Welcome to our deep dive into John Taylor Gatto's Weapons of Mass Instruction.
Oh, this is going to be good.
We're going to try to unpack some of the core themes and implications of his critique of the education system.
Yeah. Gatto, a former New York State Teacher of the Year, he doesn't hold back.
He does not hold back.
He argues that the real purpose of compulsory schooling is to create a standardized, obedient workforce for the benefit of corporations.
Right.
Not to foster intellectual development or a democratic way of life.
No, he doesn't pull any punches, that's for sure.
No.
One of the things that struck me was how Gatto uses historical figures like H.L. Mencken and Woodrow Wilson to support his argument.
Yeah.
It's not just some fringe theory, you know? This idea's been around for a while.
Yeah, Mencken, way back in 1924.
Wow.
Said the aim of public education was to reduce as many individuals as possible to the same safe level. He saw it as a way to suppress dissent and originality.
Right, essentially to create a society of followers, not leaders.
Exactly.
And Woodrow Wilson, before he even became president, expressed similar views.
Yes. In 1909, he told a group of businessmen that while one class should have a liberal education, a very much larger class should be trained for specific manual tasks. It's clear that he saw education as a way to prepare people for predetermined roles in society, roles that benefit those in power.
And benefit the people in power.
Yeah.
And then Gatto takes this idea a step further. By connecting it to the economic concept of overproduction.
Exactly.
If everybody was highly educated and independent, could that be a threat to the established order?
That's exactly Gatto's point. He argues that a populace that's too independent and resourceful could produce more than the market can handle, leading to economic instability.
Right. So it's almost like too much of a good thing.
Right?
If everyone's producing, then the market would be flooded.
Exactly.
And that's not what
prices would go down.
Prices would go down.
And
this system doesn't want that.
That's not good.
Doesn't want that.
The people at the top.
Right. So schooling, in his view, was designed to prevent this by encouraging consumption over production.
Consumption over production and discouraging.
And discouraging critical thinking?
Right. So instead of learning to be self-sufficient and potentially disruptive, we're conditioned to be good consumers.
Good consumers and compliant workers.
And this all ties into his critique of adolescence as this artificially extended period of dependence.
Exactly. Gatto points out that in the past, young people were expected to contribute to society much earlier.
He uses Andrew Carnegie, who started working at age 7.
Wow, that's incredible.
As an example. By delaying the entry into adulthood, the system keeps young people reliant and consuming for
a longer period of time.
It's
like we're being kept in this perpetual state of childhood. Discouraged from taking on real responsibility until much later in life.
Exactly.
And this, of course, benefits the very system that he's critiquing.
This system.
It's kind of a self-perpetuating cycle.
What's fascinating here is how Gatto connects this to Frederick Taylor's scientific management. Those principles, designed for factory efficiency, seem to be mirrored in how schools are structured.
It's like we're being molded into efficient workers from a very young age.
From a young age.
The emphasis on obedience, following the rules, not questioning authority. It all seems very much in line.
It all makes sense.
With Taylor's ideas.
In line with Taylor's ideas,
And that emphasis on control extends to what we learn, too.
Exactly.
Gatto criticizes abstract learning and standardized testing, arguing that they disconnect children
from
real-world experiences and make it harder to think critically and solve practical problems.
And to solve practical problems.
He points to declining literacy rates. Despite increased spending on education as evidence that something isn't working.
Something's not working.
Something's not working, It's like we're being taught to memorize facts and figures, but not to think for ourselves. Or apply that knowledge to real-life situations.
Real-life situations.
It's interesting, though, that Gatto, while deeply critical of schooling, still believes in the power of true education.
Absolutely. He makes a clear distinction between schooling and education. For him, true education is about self-discovery, connecting with the world, and personal growth. It happens through real-world experiences and critical thinking, not just within the confines of a classroom.
Not within the confines of a classroom, And he uses some compelling examples to illustrate this point. He does, like David Sarnoff, who rose to president of RCA despite dropping out of elementary school.
Sarnoff saw the streets as his classroom, learning from real-world experiences. And applying that knowledge to achieve success.
That's incredible.
Gatto also highlights Nick Schulman, who became a successful entrepreneur by the age of 21 after leaving junior high. And Diablo Cody, who took a very unconventional path to becoming an Oscar-winning screenwriter.
That's so interesting. These stories really challenge the idea.
They challenge the idea
that there's only one path to success. Right. He even uses the Lancaster Amish community.
He does.
As an example. Despite their limited formal schooling, they've built a thriving and successful community that values practical skills and a strong work ethic.
It's a powerful example of how success can be defined and achieved in ways that go beyond traditional measures.
Now, in Weapons of Mass Instruction, Gatto identifies specific weapons employed by the schooling system to achieve its goals. Let's talk about some of those, starting with what he calls the trapped flea strategy.
The trapped flea strategy, Gatto uses the analogy of fleas in a jar. They'll naturally jump to escape. But if you put a lid on the jar, they'll eventually learn not to jump so high. And even after you remove the lid, they remain imprisoned by their own self-imposed limitations.
Right. Wow, that's a powerful metaphor for how standardized testing and constant evaluation can condition students to accept limitations and have low expectations.
Exactly.
It's like they're being trained to stay within the box.
Afraid
to reach their full potential.
Afraid to reach their full potential.
And what about the ugliness weapon? Gatto points to the often drab and uninspiring physical environments of many schools. Is this just a coincidence? Or is there something more deliberate at play?
Gatto believes it's intentional. These uninspiring spaces are designed to discourage creativity and keep students focused on conformity and obedience. It's about suppressing individuality and independent thinking.
So it's almost like a form of, I don't know. Almost like a psychological manipulation.
It's about the environment.
The environment is sending a message.
It's sending a message.
Don't be creative. Don't be different.
Don't be creative. Don't stand out.
Don't stand out. Gatto also talks about the horse and box effect.
The horse and box effect.
As a way to limit student freedom. And create a sense of dependence.
It's all about bells, schedules, and following directions.
It's like students are being trained to live within a system of constant control. They're told when to sit, when to stand,
when to speak,
when to be quiet. It's about conditioning them to follow orders.
Without question.
So it's not just about controlling their behavior, but also about shaping their minds. And that leads us to misdirection. Where schools steer students away.
Away from knowledge.
That might empower them to challenge the status quo.
It's a subtle form of censorship. Ensuring that students don't learn things that might make them critical thinkers or question authority.
And finally, there's the cauldron of broken time.
The cauldron of broken time.
Which refers to the way schools deny students the uninterrupted time. They need for deep thought. And creativity. We live in a world of constant distractions.
We do.
And schools, with their bells, schedule, and constant demands for attention exacerbate this problem. It's like trying to write a novel in 5-minute increments.
You
You need that.
You need that time.
Extended time.
extended time.
To really delve into a subject, to let your thoughts develop, and to make connections. So it sounds like Gatto sees the structure of schooling itself as a barrier to true learning.
Yes. But despite this bleak assessment, Gatto is not without hope. He offers solutions and alternative approaches to education.
Okay, and that's what I find so intriguing about Gatto's work. He doesn't just criticize.
He
offers a vision.
Offers a vision for something better.
Yeah. Let's dive into those alternatives.
Okay.
In the next part of our deep dive.
Let's do it. So, Gatto's vision for a better way to learn really boils down to three main ideas.
Okay.
Active listening, personalized learning, and reconnecting to the real world.
Okay.
He believes that these are the keys to unlocking true potential.
Those are great, and they make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
It's about moving away from passive learning and standardized curricula towards something more dynamic and individualized.
Exactly.
So let's break each one down.
Okay.
What does Gatto mean by active learning?
Active learning means engaging directly with the world, not just reading about it in textbooks.
Okay.
Think apprenticeships, real-world projects, or even travel. Anything that allows you to learn by doing and apply knowledge to solve real problems.
It's like the difference between reading about how to build a house and actually building one.
Exactly.
Yeah. The real learning happens in the doing, not just the knowing.
And the doing.
Right. Yeah. And this ties into personalized learning.
It does.
Gatto argues that everyone learns differently.
Everyone learns differently.
And we should be forced into a one-size-fits-all system.
Right.
Education should be tailored to individual needs and interests.
Yeah, not standardized for the masses.
Not standardized for the masses. So instead of everyone marching to the beat of the same drum, we should be encouraged to find our own rhythm, our own path to learning.
Exactly.
This sounds very empowering.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
And the third piece of Gatto's vision, reconnecting to the real world, is about breaking free from the confines of the classroom. He believes that true learning happens in the messy, complex world outside of those walls.
It's about recognizing that the world is our classroom, right?
Yes.
And every experience, every interaction is a potential learning opportunity.
Gatto calls this open source learning.
Okay.
It's self-directed, happening outside of traditional institutions, and allows you to draw from a wide array of resources and experiences.
Okay, so that's...
And he has a radical proposal for how to start moving toward this vision.
Right.
The Bartleby Project.
Okay, you've mentioned the Bartleby Project a couple of times now. It's inspired by the Herman Melville story, right?
Yes, the main character, Bartleby, simply refuses to do the tasks he's asked to perform, repeatedly saying, "I would prefer not to."
Right.
Gatto proposes a similar act of passive resistance, but on a mass scale.
So, instead of refusing to copy documents, students would refuse to
take standardized tests.
Gatto
sees these tests as a major tool of the trapped flee strategy, and he believes a mass refusal would force a reevaluation of the entire system.
It's a bold move.
It is.
And it would definitely send a message.
It would.
But while we're on the topic of standardized tests, I'm curious about something.
Okay.
Gatto criticizes these tests as tools of control. But don't they also serve a purpose?
That's the question.
Yeah. How else can we measure student progress?
Right.
And ensure accountability?
And Gatto would argue that standardized tests
are a very narrow and often misleading measure of true learning.
Okay.
They incentivize teaching to the test, encourage rote memorization, and don't capture the nuances of individual strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, it's like trying to assess the health of an entire forest.
Yeah.
By measuring the height of a single tree.
Exactly.
Right.
You're missing the bigger picture.
And
the pressure to perform well on these tests creates a culture of anxiety and fear, which can stifle creativity and discourage students from taking intellectual risks.
Yeah, it's not really conducive to real learning.
Real learning, no.
Gatto also talks about
it does.
How the principles of scientific management designed for factories have seeped into our education system.
He makes a compelling case for that connection.
It does, yeah.
Think about the core principles of scientific management. Standardization, efficiency, control. Right.
Don't they sound familiar in the context of schooling?
They do. We have standardized curricula.
Yes.
Bells dictating our every move.
Uh-huh.
An emphasis on producing measurable results.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like we're churning out compliant workers instead of nurturing critical thinkers and innovators.
Gatto argues that this system creates a disconnected mind. One that struggles to see the bigger picture or make connections between ideas and experiences.
Right.
He contrasts this with the connected mind.
Okay.
Which thrives on making those connections and seeing the world in all its complexity.
So true education isn't just about stuffing our heads with facts and figures, but about developing our capacity to think critically, to analyze, and to synthesize information.
Exactly.
And that kind of learning often happens outside of traditional classrooms.
It does.
In real-world settings where we're challenged to apply our knowledge and skills in dynamic ways.
In dynamic ways.
Gatto also delves into the historical roots of our current system.
Yes.
Tracing it back to 18th and 19th century Prussia.
Right.
He uses the term Teutonic to describe this model, emphasizing its focus on obedience, standardization, and creating a compliant workforce.
It's fascinating.
It is,
how these historical forces continue to shape our approach to education today.
Yeah, the need for a disciplined and obedient workforce.
Right.
During the Industrial Revolution may have made sense at the time.
Yeah.
But it's worth questioning whether this model is still serving us well.
Exactly.
In the 21st century.
In the 21st century,
Especially in a world where creativity, innovation, and critical thinking are increasingly valuable.
Increasingly valuable.
And Gatto's critique extends.
It does.
To how specific subjects like reading and history are taught.
Yeah.
He believes we've stripped them of their joy and relevance, turning them into dry, lifeless exercises in memorization.
Lifeless exercises in memorization.
It's like we're missing the forest for the trees, right?
Right.
We're so focused on the mechanics and the minutia that we forget to cultivate a love of learning and a sense of wonder.
A sense of wonder.
Gatto also talks about the shadow economy of schools.
The shadow economy.
Which refers to all the non-teaching activities that consume time and resources.
Right.
Administrative tasks, meetings, paperwork.
Yeah.
And, of course, standardized testing.
Standardized testing, this shadow economy, often overshadows the actual work of teaching and learning.
Right. Benefiting the system itself.
Benefiting the system.
More than the students.
Yeah, more than the students.
And Gatto sees this as a symptom of a larger problem. The increasing bureaucratization and corporatization of education.
It's like the system has become a self-perpetuating machine. Focused more on its own survival than on serving the needs of students.
Gatto would say that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I found most intriguing in Gatto's work is his critique of the concept of adolescence.
Adolescence, yes.
He argues that this is an artificial construct designed to prolong childhood.
Prolong childhood.
And keep young people.
And keep young people.
In a state of dependence.
He believes that the concept of adolescence is a relatively modern invention. A product of industrialism. And the need for a more manageable workforce. By delaying adulthood, the system keeps young people consuming and compliant. For a longer period of time.
It's interesting to think about.
It is.
How our definitions of childhood and adulthood have changed over time. And how these shifts have been influenced by social, economic, and political forces.
Gatto's point is that this extended period of adolescence isn't necessarily beneficial for young people. It can delay their entry into the real world, stifle their natural curiosity and desire to contribute. And reinforce a sense of dependence on adults.
Right. It's like we're being kept in a holding pattern.
A holding pattern.
Yeah. Prevented from fully engaging with the world and taking on the responsibilities of adulthood.
Gatto argues that this is a deliberate strategy designed to create a more compliant and manageable workforce.
And that brings us to his discussion of the Bionomics Project.
The Bionomics Project.
Which is a bit unsettling to think about.
It is a bit unsettling.
Can you tell us more about this?
Bionomics refers to a movement in the early 20th century that sought to apply the principles of biology and genetics to the management of society. It was driven by a desire to create a more efficient and productive society.
Right.
But it also led to the development of some deeply problematic ideas, such as eugenics.
The idea that human populations could be improved through selective breeding is a very dark chapter in human history.
It is.
It's hard to believe that such ideas were once considered mainstream.
Gatto argues that while eugenics may be less overt today, it still influences the way we think about education and social policy.
Right.
He sees standardized testing, tracking, and other forms of educational stratification as modern-day expressions of this eugenic impulse.
So instead of valuing diversity and recognizing the unique potential of each individual, we're still trying to categorize and rank students based on narrow measures of intelligence and ability.
Gatto would say that's a key part of how the system maintains control. It's about creating hierarchies, not fostering equality.
Now, while Gatto's critique of the school system is powerful and persuasive, it's also important to acknowledge that he's been criticized by some.
Of course.
What are some of the main criticisms?
One common criticism is that he oversimplifies the complexities of education and ignores the positive aspects of schooling.
Right. Some argue that
he romanticizes the past and fails to appreciate the progress that has been made in providing access to education for all children.
It's true that education has become more accessible.
It has.
Over the past century.
It has, and while Gatto acknowledges this, he argues that this increased access has come at a cost in terms of quality, individuality, and freedom.
He believes that we've sacrificed the quality of education in the pursuit of quantity.
Yes, and he also points out that despite increased access to education, we still see significant disparities in educational outcomes based on race, class, and other factors.
So while more children are going to school, not all children are receiving an equal education.
Exactly. And Gatto argues that this is a systemic problem, rooted in the structure and philosophy of the school system itself.
Now, another criticism is that he doesn't offer any concrete solutions to the problems he identifies. And while it's true that he doesn't lay out like a step-by-step plan for educational reform, he does offer a number of suggestions.
He does.
And alternative approaches that are worth considering.
Absolutely. Open source learning is a big part of his vision.
Right.
But he also encourages things like homeschooling, unschooling, and creating learning communities. He believes that parents and educators should be creative and think outside the box when it comes to education.
So it's about recognizing that there's no one right way to learn.
Exactly.
And that we need to create diverse options that cater to the unique needs and interests of each individual.
Gatto's work ultimately serves as a call to action. A reminder that we have the power to shape the kind of education we want for ourselves and future generations.
His analysis of the school system, while challenging, is also incredibly important.
It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. And to ask ourselves some fundamental questions.
Like,
what is the purpose of education? What kind of society do we want to create? And what role do we want schools to play in that process?
Those are big questions.
Big questions.
And there are no easy answers.
No easy answers.
But I think engaging with these questions is essential if we want to move towards a more just, equitable, and empowering education system for all.
Absolutely.
Now, before we get to Gatto's analysis of the incident at Highland High School, which you mentioned earlier, I'd like to touch on one more point he raises in his book. The idea that schools often fail to prepare students for the realities of the modern world.
That's a key part of his critique. Gatto argues that the skills and knowledge often emphasized in schools aren't necessarily the ones most valuable in the real world.
He points out that
many successful entrepreneurs, artists, and innovators achieved success without following a traditional educational path.
So he's not saying that traditional education is worthless.
Right.
But that it often prioritizes the wrong things.
It prioritizes the wrong things.
It's like we're being trained for a world that no longer exists.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
He believes that success in the real world depends more on qualities like creativity, critical thinking, problem-solving skills, adaptability, and willingness to take risks.
Right.
Qualities that aren't always nurtured in the traditional classroom.
It's about being able to think on your feet, to adapt to change, and to come up with creative solutions to unforeseen challenges.
Exactly.
Right. Those are the skills that will truly prepare you for the complexities of the 21st century.
Those are the skills, and those are the skills that Gatto believes should be at the heart of a truly valuable education.
Right.
He advocates for a more holistic approach.
Okay.
One that focuses on developing the whole person, not just their cognitive abilities.
So it's not just about acquiring knowledge or getting a job.
Right.
But about becoming a well-rounded individual.
Yes.
Capable of thinking critically, acting ethically, and contributing to the betterment of society.
He believes that education should be about more than just preparing for a career.
Right.
It should be about preparing for a life of meaning and purpose.
And that brings us to his analysis of the incident at Highland High School.
Yes.
This sounds like a story that really encapsulates many of the themes we've been discussing.
It's a stark example of how schools can prioritize control and conformity over truth and freedom of thought.
So for those who haven't read Gatto's book, can you tell us what happened?
Gatto was invited to speak at Highland High School. A well-regarded school in a wealthy district. He planned to give a talk challenging conventional views about education and success.
Sounds pretty straightforward so far.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But things took a rather unexpected turn during his talk.
Yeah.
Gatto shared examples of successful people who had dropped out of school or taken unconventional paths, people like Bill Gates and Richard Branson.
Right, so he was essentially presenting an alternative to the idea that college is the only path to success.
Exactly.
And this apparently was too much for the school administration to handle.
Apparently.
While Gatto was speaking, the school superintendent, alarmed by the content of his talk, called the police.
Called the police.
Yes. Oh, wow. The police. They arrived at the school and shut down Gatto's talk.
Wow.
Essentially censoring his message.
It's incredible that simply sharing ideas and information could be seen as such a threat.
Gatto saw this incident as confirmation of his belief that schools are often more concerned with maintaining order and control than with fostering critical thinking and intellectual freedom.
Yeah, it's a pretty stark example.
It is.
Of how power can be used to silence dissent.
Yes.
And to enforce conformity.
Exactly.
And it raises some important questions about the role of schools in a democratic society.
In a democratic society.
If schools are supposed to prepare students for active citizenship, shouldn't they be encouraging critical thinking and open dialogue, even when those ideas challenge the status quo?
Even when those ideas challenge the status quo. It's like we're saying we value critical thinking.
Yeah.
But only within certain boundaries.
Within certain boundaries.
Only as long as it doesn't threaten the established order.
That's a dangerous precedent to set.
It is a dangerous precedent.
Yeah.
Now, in the final section of his book, Gatto discusses a plan.
He does.
For dismantling the current school system.
Right.
And building something better in its place.
He outlines his strategy for the Bartleby Project, which we discussed earlier.
Right. A mass, peaceful refusal of standardized testing. As a way to disrupt the system and create an opportunity for real change.
He believes that such a bold act of civil disobedience would force a reevaluation of the entire education system. And open up space for alternative approaches to learning.
So it's not just about tearing down the old system, but about building something new and better in its place.
Exactly. Gatto's vision is one of open source learning, where students are empowered to take ownership of their education and to learn in a way that is meaningful and engaging.
It's a vision that is both challenging and inspiring.
It is.
And it's one that we'll explore further in the final part of our deep dive into weapons of mass instruction.
Sounds good.
We left off talking about Gatto's vision for open source learning.
Right.
And the Bartleby Project. It's a pretty radical idea.
It is.
But it really speaks to his belief that real change requires bold action.
It does.
So he sees the Bartleby Project as a way to kind of disrupt the status quo.
Yeah, disrupt the status quo.
And shift the power dynamic in education.
Shift the power dynamic.
He believes that a mass refusal of standardized testing would force those in control to listen to the voices of students.
The voices of students.
And consider alternative approaches.
Alternative approaches.
About reclaiming agency, right?
Yeah, reclaiming agency.
And demanding a system that truly serves...
That truly serves the needs.
The needs of learners. But let's dive a bit deeper into what open source learning looks like in practice.
Okay.
You mentioned apprenticeships, internships, and mentorship as examples.
Yeah, imagine a world where instead of being confined to a classroom, you could learn a trade by working alongside an experienced craft person or gain real-world skills through an internship at a company that aligns with your interests.
Right, it's about learning by doing.
Learning by doing.
By immersing yourself in a real-world environment.
Exactly.
And applying knowledge to solve actual problems.
Applying knowledge to solve real problems, yeah.
Gatto also sees travel as a form of open-source learning.
Travel.
By experiencing different cultures and perspectives.
Yeah.
You broaden your understanding of the world and develop a more nuanced and compassionate worldview.
Right. It's about stepping outside of your comfort zone and challenging your assumptions.
And mentorship is a crucial part of this model, too.
Mentorship.
Having someone to guide you, share their expertise, and offer support can make a world of difference.
Gatto believes that mentorship relationships can be incredibly powerful. Providing learners with personalized guidance and helping them navigate the complexities of their chosen field. He also stresses the importance of self-directed learning.
Self-directed learning, this is about taking ownership of your education, following your curiosity, and pursuing knowledge that is personally meaningful to you.
Absolutely.
In today's world, with access to so much information at our fingertips. Self-directed learning has become even more accessible. We have libraries, online courses, museums, documentaries, podcasts.
The resources are endless.
It's
about being proactive, seeking out knowledge, and making connections across different fields and disciplines.
It's about becoming a lifelong learner. Driven by a genuine thirst for knowledge and a desire to make sense of the world around you. And that, I think, is at the heart of Gatto's message.
It is.
He wants us to rediscover the joy of learning.
Rediscover the joy of learning.
The inherent pleasure of exploring new ideas. And expanding our understanding.
Exactly.
He sees education not as a means to an end. But as a valuable and enriching experience in itself. And he challenges us to question the assumptions. We've been taught about success. It's not just about getting good grades, going to college, and getting a high-paying job. It's about finding work that is meaningful to you. Contributing to something larger than yourself. And living a life of purpose.
Gatto's work is a powerful reminder.
It is.
That we have more choices than we often realize. And that we have the power to shape our own educational journeys and define success on our own terms.
His analysis of the school system is a call to action.
It is.
Urging us to create a more just, equitable, and empowering educational landscape for all learners. It's about recognizing the inherent potential. In every individual. And creating learning environments that nurture that potential. Rather than trying to fit everyone into the same mold. Well, this has been a truly insightful deep dive into John Taylor Gatto's Weapons of Mass Instruction.
It has been.
His work is challenging, thought-provoking, and ultimately incredibly hopeful.
It is.
It's a reminder that we don't have to accept the status quo.
We don't.
And that we have the power to create a better future for education.
We do.
And for ourselves. We hope this deep dive has given you a deeper understanding of Gatto's ideas and inspired you to think critically about the role of education in your own life and in the world around you.
Absolutely.
Remember, the most valuable lessons are often learned outside of the classroom, In the real world.
In the real world.
Through experiences, interactions, and self-discovery.
And self-discovery.
So keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
Keep questioning.
Keep questioning.
And keep learning.
And keep learning.